Mining Weekly Online is speaking to Katie Ferguson, the Senior Vice President, Sustainable Impact for the De Beers Group. Katie, thanks so much for speaking to Mining Weekly for our special feature on ESG. Firstly, what is Building Forever and why is it so important to the De Beers Group?
So Building Forever for De Beers is our approach to sustainability. It's how we work to leave a positive and long-lasting legacy beyond mining. And in November last year, what we did was launch 12, we call them stretch goals. They're 2030 goals, so they're 10-year goals, and they're bold and ambitious. And they sit under 4 pillars. So the 4 pillars are leading ethical practices across industry. So there we're looking at responsible sourcing, provenance, artisanal mining, partnering for thriving communities. So there we're looking at community health and well-being, livelihood, skills and education. Protecting the natural world is the third one, looking at carbon. How do we get to carbon neutral across our operations by 2030, biodiversity and water. And then finally, we have a pillar on accelerating equal opportunity. So that's really looking at the workforce and creating an inclusive workforce, including one with gender parity, which is a stretch in mining, and looking at supporting women in business and in tech fields, and diversity of all underrepresented groups across design in the diamond industry. So some of these are areas which we have been working in for years and some even decades, such as conservation and HIV/AIDS and responsible sourcing. But some of these are areas where we wanted to create a real step change and light a fire under the business to really accelerate progress. And so, for example, climate change is a good example of that. And why is it so important to us? I know that increasingly, it's always been important to the host countries and communities where we operate. And we really feel that we have got a unique responsibility and a unique opportunity to work with partners in these countries to create this long-term positive impact. It's also increasingly important to our employees. We hear about it more and more at interviews. And it's increasingly important to our clients and our consumers. So right across our value chain, right across every stakeholder group, this is something that is accelerating, increasing in importance and really business critical and not just the right thing to do.
How do you go about implementing a sustainability framework of this scale across a global business like De Beers?
De Beers is a very diverse business. It goes from mining right the way through to retail. So the first thing that we had to do was make sure that we developed a framework and goals that could provide a real North Star for the group and that we could hold ourselves accountable for delivering as a group, but that was flexible enough that each part of the business could take it and make it relevant to what they were doing and to their local context and stakeholders. For each one of the 12 goals, we've got a technical expert that leads on that goal, develops the baselines and the roadmaps, and really provides the technical oversight and guidance. Each part of the business needs to develop a 5-year plan, and they're all working on those at the moment. Some are complete, some are still in development, to show how they are going to implement these goals and contribute to the overall group targets. But I think as well, all of that is really important. But we also, at the same time, need the culture and mindset work. And we need to make sure that, as a culture, sustainability is absolutely embedded into every role, into our behaviours, into our decision-making. So some of the things we're doing there are working with our employee engagement team on a campaign using lots of different channels, podcasts, town halls, newsletters, value shares, to really get this out to all of our employees wherever they work across the business, and working with HR on how do we build this into every job description. There's now a sustainability module in every one of our leadership development programs. That's really key. And we're very lucky with the level of senior leadership support that we have in De Beers for this, but really making sure that at every level of the business, it's really embedded, and it's in the way that people are rewarded and incentivized, and in every decision-making process.
And you've given yourself 10 years to achieve these goals. What early success factors are you seeing in each pillar?
I'll choose a few examples from across the pillars. On our carbon neutral work, for example, that's a really big, bold goal in 10 years to be carbon neutral across all of our operations, from mining through to retail. So we have been working very closely with partners like the Carbon Trust to develop a strategy that it sits around 3 pillars. So reduce, recover, replace. And in Reduce, we are focused on new technologies through Anglo American's Future Smart Mining program to really maximize efficiencies at the mine, and reduce energy use through those innovative technologies. On Replace, we're looking at how do we move away from fossil fuels for the trucks, so moving to green hydrogen, for example, and to renewable generation and storage, which we need to look at how do we build that? How do we take advantage of this great solar and wind we have across Southern Africa to partner and build those solutions? And who else could those solutions benefit, for example? And then on Recover, for the small percentage of remaining emissions that we can't eliminate through the first 2 pillars, we're looking at different innovations. One, looking at using the kimberlite in the waste around the mines, which is a natural absorber of carbon dioxide. So how do we accelerate that natural process? But also, we have 200,000 hectares of conservation properties across Southern Africa, which are actively managed to protect and enhance biodiversity. So working with partners such as Fauna and Flora International on the potential for nature-based solutions on those properties to enhance carbon capture and storage. So lots of exciting things happening there, and it's definitely pushing our creative thinking. Then on our Accelerating for Equal Opportunity pillar, which is one I'm really passionate about, we've just launched in March. We just announced the extension for another 5 years of our global partnership with UN Women. And we saw the achievement in the first 3 years of our partnership. We went from no women on our executive committee to now 46% of our exec committee are women. We went from 17% of our leadership across the business being women to 30% now, and 33% in our managed operations. So more work to do, but that's considerable acceleration when it shows what you can do when the whole business sets their mind to something. And we're now really focused on how do we build that pipeline, particularly of women in technical roles. So how do we support them right the way through school, undergraduate, and into that technical pipeline. And then in our Partnering for Thriving Communities pillar, just to choose one example, our Venetia mine, they've just announced phase 2 on 2 big programs in our livelihoods and skills goal space. So in livelihoods, we're seeing a real opportunity in the agriculture and agro-processing space for large-scale job creation at all different multiple skills levels. So we're working with the Lima Rural Development Foundation at Venetia, and in the pilot phase, they supported 500 small-scale farmers through technical assistance and access to market and to new value chains. And we're expanding that for another 5 years with the aim of supporting a further 3,000 jobs around Venetia. And in the skills space, I think quite an exciting one, our Skills for the Future programme, working with the International Youth Foundation and the Department of Higher Education and Training and industry in Limpopo, including many of our large contractors at the mine, on another 3-year expansion of a program which really looks at how do we understand not just the skills that industry need for today, but also in 5, 10, 15 years' time, and support the TVET colleges to keep updating their curriculum, capacity building of lecturers, building in life skills into those programs, and so that when the graduates emerge from those colleges for internships, for job opportunities, they're matching the demands of industry in that area. So really creating a skills ecosystem around the mine and in Limpopo more broadly. So they're just a few examples. There's a lot going on.
How are you going to track progress against your goals?
It's going to be so important to track this carefully, not just from a perspective of how we manage the program internally, to make sure that we can pivot, we can learn. If things are not working, then we need to learn and we need to look at that and we need to adjust. But also because these are public commitments and, we need to be transparent and talk about our program as we go for all of our stakeholders. In terms of the actual implementation, as I said earlier, each part of the business is developing a 5-year plan, and the implementation of those plans is being tracked through the business scorecard. So that sits at EXCO level, and that has high visibility. And then for each of the goals, we have got baselines and roadmaps being developed, which have milestone targets. So we will have a target of what each goal needs to have achieved by the end of each year in order to meet that 2030 goal. And through our sustainability reporting, which is independently assured, we'll publicly disclose that. But I think the data is really important. I think it's equally important that we also track and share learnings as we go, not just across and within the business to support each other, but also with our partners and externally. Where we have successes, we should share the models, and where we have learnings where things don't work, it's equally important to share those. And I think we also need to share the stories. We need to share the stories of the people doing the work, the stories of the people impacted by the work of our partners, of our communities. I think that's a really important part of our role here as well, is effecting a broader change around sustainability and business and sustainability needs to be a combination of data and inspirational stories and being open about the learnings.
And finally, Katie, how has COVID-19 impacted your overall response to ESG issues?
Yes, I think it's impacted everything, hasn't it? ESG has been important to De Beers for a very long time. But I think we saw a few things with the pandemic. I think firstly, the business, once we realised the scale and the potential implications of the pandemic, which obviously I think the world did realise quite quickly, we absolutely pivoted as a business. So the entire business was focused on prioritising support for our employees to keep them safe and healthy, and for our host countries and communities. And over the last 15 months, we have contributed over $17 million in financial donations and in-kind support, along with our joint ventures, to that response. And we've really looked at that in 3 areas. We've looked at the prevention stage, so donating hygiene supplies and medical supplies, supporting educational campaigns around for public health, working with public health authorities, supporting building better access to water and sanitation in some communities. And then the response phase, so PCR testing, ICU beds and equipment, ventilators, and also the economic and social consequences of the lockdown. So food parcels to vulnerable groups who couldn't leave their homes, supporting something that we have been doing during the pandemic is working with UN Women to support organisations in the communities around our operations who are supporting survivors of gender-based violence, so through helplines or through facilities or through supporting volunteers for those services. And then in the recover phase, so we're quite focused at the moment on supporting vaccine procurement and rollout and using our facilities as part of the rollout, but also on supporting small businesses and helping them to be resilient through this recovery phase. And I think that links to another sort of ESG impact, in that many of our programs were quite dependent on being face-to-face for coaching, business training, education. And so initially in the pandemic, while we were very focused on the COVID response, we were also a bit concerned that some of our programs were stalled because, we couldn't hold these face-to-face workshops and so on, and our partners couldn't get out to run the programs. But the silver lining of that is actually we went back to our partners and said, what can we do here to still provide support during this time? Many of the programs pivoted and trialed different virtual solutions, and many of them have realized that actually that will remain post-pandemic. They'll build in digital formats as part of the program. We can't replace face-to-face for everything, but we can do a lot more digitally than we were doing. And through that, we can reach more people, we can scale the programs, and we can reach people over a wider geographic area. So there's been some real successes there, which probably we wouldn't have learned if we hadn't been forced to pivot and regroup with partners and think creatively. And then I think what we've all seen through the pandemic is everybody globally having the time to reflect on the importance and the interconnectedness of all of these issues, on health, on environment, on social inequality, on financial resilience, and how interconnected they all are. And so trends that we were seeing with our consumers and with other stakeholders across our value chain pre-pandemic have absolutely been accelerated through the pandemic. And I think what that meant for us is sustainability was moving from something that was so important to us as a business and so core to our values, but probably still sitting largely with the sustainability teams. I think what we've seen is an acceleration of it moving absolutely to the core of our strategy. And so being embedded into strategy and innovation, into how we recruit and develop our employees, how we engage with our employees and all of our stakeholders, how we partner, into our brand and marketing. And so I think it's really accelerated that shift to the absolute core of the business, and everybody across the business realizing that this is part of their role. And that's really exciting. And I think will mean we can really scale our impact, but also, be an even more successful company.
That was Creamer Media's Lighting Weekly, speaking to Katie Ferguson, the Senior Vice President, Sustainable Impact for the De Beers Group.